Tonight on Reporting Scotland, a BBC investigation exposes how wealthy bankrupts are beating the system and living lavish lives. The First Minister says continued immigration after Brexit is essential to economic prosperity. Andy Murray has an operation on his hip and says he hopes to be back in action in time for Wimbledon. New research suggests over 40% of parents are scared to let their children walk to school alone.
Kids are kids, they will run, and the speed that the cars along this road as well is ridiculous. Double parking outside the school, things like that, is all a safety issue, so for me it's a lot safer driving to school.
And later in the programme, we take you deep into the Galloway Forest, the biggest in the UK, to meet those who live and work there. Good evening. A BBC investigation has exposed how some of the country's biggest bankrupts have been able to keep hold of their assets and their wealth. Insolvencies are on the rise in Scotland, and there's evidence of serious failings in the process, including the government's ultimate sanction against the most reckless of bankrupts. Samantha Poling has this exclusive report.
Not bad yourself.
This is Malcolm Scott, former treasurer of the Conservative Party in Scotland, once its biggest donor, and a £41 million bankrupt.
You've got another 100 to 150 units in there.
I see. Right. OK.
Malcolm Scott has a bankruptcy restriction order against him, banning him from being the director of a company or even acting like one after he was caught hiding assets and lying to bankruptcy investigators. Yet here he is boasting about his multi-million-pound housing development in Lanarkshire.
How much are you looking to take?
15 mil.
15 million off this site?
Yeah.
Right, got you. Yeah,
and here he is acting like the boss at this housing site in Northern Ireland.
And then on the more corporate side of things, you've got...
Yeah.
And then next one up is...
Me.
You.
And that's it.
And that's it. You're the head shed,
yes,
as we would know.
It. Exactly.
Yeah, right.
A bankruptcy restriction order is the government's ultimate sanction against the country's most dishonest or reckless debtors.
It extends the conditions of the bankruptcy so that people can't be involved in the management and formation and directorship of companies, and they can't obtain credit over a certain amount. These are court orders. If you breach these, this is like a contempt of court.
They're breaking the law.
It's a criminal offence to breach these orders.
Richard Dennis is the head of the AIB, the government agency in Scotland which gave Malcolm Scott and others like him their BROs. Who monitors BROs?
There is no positive monitoring of BROs. We rely on creditors to take account of the fact that there is that public record of the red flag against these debtors.
Nobody's monitoring them?
Not proactively, no.
Not actively?
Yeah.
Another weakness in the system includes under-resourcing, meaning some declarations of assets go unchecked. This man claimed he only had a £30 watch, some furniture, and lived in a shed.
Oh my gosh!
And that's the shed.
Inside, a 6-bedroom mansion complete with cannabis farm. Insolvency practitioners whose job it is to get money back for the creditors get paid from what's eventually realised in the case.
Is there a time when you have to call it a day because you're not convinced you're going to get that asset or realise the money?
I mean, of course there's a balance. There's always a cost-benefit analysis. Perhaps the funds are in an incredibly difficult regime, for example, and you're just not going to be able to get them. Well, then you just have to draw a line on it, write off the money that you've spent and move on to the next case.
We asked Malcolm Scott for a statement and, through his solicitor, he denied acting as a director of any company. Samantha Poling, Reporting Scotland.
And you can see Sam Poling's investigation, Millionaire Bankrupts Exposed, tonight on BBC One Scotland at 8:30. Nicola Sturgeon is planning a campaign to persuade Scots of the advantages of immigration. The First Minister told BBC Scotland that freedom of movement across the EU after Brexit was vital to protect the Scottish economy. Ms Sturgeon was speaking to our political editor, Brian Taylor.
Nicola Sturgeon would rather stay in the European Union, but her government is working on a new document looking at options, including remaining in the European single market after Brexit. EU leaders say that's impossible unless freedom of movement for people is maintained. The First Minister acknowledges that and says she's ready to confront Scottish concerns over immigration.
Politicians have a duty to be honest with people. Freedom of movement, the ability of us in Scotland to attract talent from other countries, is essential, not just to our reputation as an open, welcoming country, but essential to our economic prosperity in the years ahead.
But right now there is concern about that, there is anxiety about that. You need to get over that, don't you?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think it's incumbent on politicians not to sort of shy away from those arguments, but instead to pay them the respect they deserve, but to level with people about why freedom of movement is important. Now, let me put it in
why immigration is important.
Why immigration is important. If we see a real constraint on freedom of movement in the years ahead, the real danger is that Scotland's working age population will start to decline again at a time when our population overall is ageing. Now, the stark reality of that is fewer people working in our economy. There's a report out today on business confidence. Businesses will already talk about the concerns they have about the ability to recruit skilled labour, but it will also mean we've got fewer taxpayers in future paying the taxes that support our National Health Service and our other public services. So this is an issue of national self-interest.
Brexit's huge, but so's the day job, including the NHS.
Ambulance service, can you confirm the telephone?
Visiting an ambulance call centre, Nicola Sturgeon insisted there had been winter planning and extra money, but she cited exceptional pressure from flu and severe weather.
That means that there will be some patients who've waited longer than they should have done for treatment over that period, and as I will always do, apologise unreservedly to any patient in that position. But I want, most importantly of all, to take this opportunity to thank the NHS staff who've been working so hard.
And independence? Nicola Sturgeon says she will only make up her mind about whether to hold a second Scottish referendum when the Brexit terms are clearer, perhaps by October.
It would make no logical sense for me to say that I'm going to assess the situation when we've got more clarity, but then immediately to start to preempt that decision by sort of being tempted down the road that you're trying to take me. Do I believe Scotland's going to become an independent country? Well within my lifetime, sooner rather than later, yes I do.
A decision then on hold, as with so much where Brexit is concerned.
Brian is here. Brian, why do you think the First Minister is reluctant to be more firm on a second independence referendum?
It's a question of confidence, Jackie. Unlike nationalist movements elsewhere, the SNP offer in Scotland has always been not flight, but confidence. That Scotland should have the confidence to take charge of her own affairs. Brexit perhaps gives the motivation for holding a second referendum, although some would dispute that. But it then engenders in itself a lack of confidence. Whatever the outcome is, and it could be good, it could be bad, right now there is concern, there is anxiety, there is fretfulness. If you're to add an independence offer on top of that existing fretfulness, then Nicola Sturgeon's calculation is that isn't particularly good timing. That's why she needs to see the nature of Brexit first before she decides if, and it is if, there should be a second referendum. There's a second question, of course. It's not in Nicola Sturgeon's gift to hold a referendum. This would be a decision for the UK government because the Constitution is reserved to Westminster. And even amid the upheaval of a reshuffle today, the UK government through Downing Street managed to say, on the question of a second Scottish referendum, no dice.
Well, something that can be controlled from Holyrood is the budget talks, and they continue. Holyrood back tomorrow.
They do. They continue Holyrood back tomorrow. We begin the scrutiny again of Derek Mackay's proposals, but behind the scenes the talks will go on because he needs another party to work with him, the SNP, in a minority. That party will be the Greens, I believe very firmly, and I believe the outline of a possible deal is there. A bit more money for local government, as the Greens are demanding, raising a bit more in income tax, particularly from the higher earners. The current take take is 160 million additionally on income tax. I think that figure will go up. I think it'll be the mid to higher earners who pay that. If you notice in the original plans, there was an anomaly whereby those earning around £50,000 actually benefited from Derek Mackay's proposals. I think that anomaly will be removed.
Brian, thank you very much. Well, staying with politics, Theresa May has been making changes to her cabinet as MPs start to return to Westminster following their Christmas break. Well, a number of ministers have remained in their posts so far, but one of the notable changes has been David Lidington's promotion to Minister for the Cabinet Office. Well, that means he'll play a key part in Brexit talks, including consultations with the Scottish Government. Well, our political correspondent Nick Earley is in Westminster for us tonight. He's been watching the comings and goings. Nick, how significant are the changes from a Scottish perspective?
I think it's been tweaks today rather than extensive change in government, Jackie. The Scottish Secretary, David Mundell, I think is likely to keep his job. He, of course, is the only Scottish Tory MP who's been in Parliament for more than 6 months. But Mr Lidington's name is one that will become more important in a Scottish context. He replaces Damien Green, who was sacked just before Christmas. You can see Mr Lidington in Downing Street this afternoon. He'll now chair a number of key UK government committees on Brexit. That, I understand, will include high-level talks with the Scottish Government on the withdrawal bill, that controversial piece of Brexit legislation that's going through Parliament at the moment. The UK Government has pledged there will be changes, so Mr Lidington has a lot to swat up on quickly. David Mundell, the Scottish Secretary, has suggested those changes could come as soon as next week. Personalities, of course, matter in talks, but it's the issues, the differences on where powers go when they come back from Brussels that is the real key sticking point. Talks over that continued over Christmas, still no breakthrough.
And of course, Nick, there are key areas still where the Westminster and Holyrood governments don't agree.
Yeah, that's right. I think even if they get agreement on the withdrawal bill, both sides want that to happen. There are a number of hurdles they will still face over the next 12 months or so. One of those is likely to be what role Scottish ministers play in negotiations. Some in government think there will have to be a formal mechanism whereby Scottish ministers are consulted on those areas where it will impact on devolved government. One minister told me that London couldn't simply make decisions when it comes to areas like education, the future of EU students, which is the responsibility of the Scottish Government in a Scottish context rather than the UK Government. So a reshuffle to get things started today, but a long, complex and, dare I say it, controversial year ahead. Brexit once again at the centre.
Thank you very much. Nick Hardley there. Andy Murray says he's confident he will compete again at the top level of tennis after undergoing hip surgery in Australia. The double Wimbledon champion had the operation in Melbourne this morning and is targeting this summer's grass court season for his comeback. Our tennis reporter Kerden Itzan can tell us more.
Twice a Wimbledon champion, Andy Murray hopes to be back at the All-England club this summer, going for the hat-trick. After withdrawing from the Brisbane International and the Australian Open last week, the former world number one didn't fly home but stayed down under to have what he's calling successful surgery on that troublesome right hip. "I'm not finished playing tennis yet," he told the BBC today. "I'm going to be competing at the highest level again. I'm very optimistic. The surgeon is very happy. My plan is to be back playing around the grass court season, potentially before then." A view fully endorsed by a leading UK hip specialist.
A lot of studies have shown that anywhere between 80 and 90% of patients with this sort of problem have been able to return to sports, to running, and to high-level activities very much in the way that Andy Murray has been doing over years.
He hasn't played a competitive match since Wimbledon last summer. It's emerged Murray had groin surgery just before Christmas and will adopt a different approach when he does get back on tour. "I'll be focusing more on trying to win major events and big tournaments. I made the quarter-finals at Wimbledon when I literally couldn't walk, so if I can get myself to 95% of my best, I believe that's enough to compete at the highest level, no question."
Having taken the decision to have hip surgery, which took place In Australia, in Melbourne at 7:30 this morning, it was conducted by a surgeon who Murray has been consulting for the past 10 years. He's now looking optimistically towards the future. He's going to be remaining in Australia for at least another week before flying home. He thinks that after 7 to 8 weeks, if all things go to plan, then he'll be able to start hitting balls again on court.
For extra motivation, he wants his eldest daughter Sophia, who's nearly 2, to see him play. That would be cool if she can watch me hit some balls, just to see what it is I do. I like seeing other kids when they are on the tour with their parents. Could she even see her dad lift another Grand Slam title? The Murray message today is that he feels his days at the top are far from over. Kerdy Nidsan, reporting Scotland.
More than 40 firefighters are dealing with a blaze at a building in the Cowgate area of Edinburgh. The fire is in a 3-storey building which houses a bar and restaurant. 7 fire engines were at the scene. There are no reports of any casualties. It's 16 minutes to 7. A reminder now of tonight's top story. A BBC investigation has exposed how some of the country's biggest bankrupts have been able to retain their wealth. And still to come, we explore Britain's largest commercial forest in Dumfries and Galloway. The trial has begun of 2 men accused of modern slavery and human trafficking. The High Court in Glasgow heard they held 3 victims at a site in Shotts in North Lanarkshire and forced them to carry out work for little or no pay. Our Home Affairs correspondent Revel Alderson was in court.
Robert McPhee and John Miller face a total of 30 charges. They're appearing here at the High Court in Glasgow alongside James McPhee and Stephen McPhee. The 7-page indictment lists a range of offences, including abduction, threats and violence against 10 men and 1 woman. Robert McPhee and John Miller are also facing charges under modern slavery legislation. It's claimed they kept 3 men in squalid conditions at Curryside Piggery in Shotts, North Lanarkshire. The charge says they refused to let the men leave and forced them to carry out work for little or no pay. The indictment details a range of violent acts, including forcing victims to eat a jar of coffee granules, forcing them to eat dog food, and getting an 8-year-old boy to pour petrol over one alleged victim while James McPhee brandished a naked flame at him. The charges also claim some of the victims were forced to a former traveller's site near Bathgate and locked in a shed for days. The 4 men deny all of the charges against them, and the trial before Lady Stacey is expected to last up to 4 weeks. Revel Alderson reporting Scotland, the High Court in Glasgow.
The number of assaults committed against emergency service workers have reached a 3-year high. There were more than 6,500 attacks on police, fire and ambulance workers last year. This number doesn't include serious assaults. Murray Council says contractors are on the site assessing the scale of the damage after the further collapse of part of Cullen's harbour wall. Stones became dislodged from the structure during Storm Caroline last month. Over the weekend, more damage occurred, leaving the wall with a gaping hole. It's been fenced off and closed to the public, although the harbour itself remains operational. The needs of communities are at risk of being ignored in Scotland's new city region deals. That's according to MSPs. The economic project, centred in Glasgow, Edinburgh, Inverness and Aberdeen, will see more than £3 billion invested. But Holyrood's local government committee is warning that communities and businesses should have more say on how the money is spent and that rural areas shouldn't miss out. Police say a report of a Microlight aircraft crashing near Stirling was a well-intentioned false alarm. Emergency services were called out late yesterday afternoon after 2 people said they'd seen an aircraft come down near the M80 at Cambusbarron. Katie Hunter reports.
Dozens of police officers and mountain rescue volunteers gathered at first light to resume their search. They were concentrating on land south of Cambusbarron. 2 people travelling on the nearby M80 called police late yesterday afternoon to say they thought they'd seen a Microlight aircraft come down in woodland. Wendy Letford lives in the village. She also saw something unusual around that time and called 101.
Just before 4 o'clock I saw a plane coming down low and slow from over that area, and just in a matter of seconds it had just disappeared and I have no idea where it went. There was no sign of smoke, no sign of fire. It was just there and then it wasn't.
Police sealed off a large area last night and, along with other emergency services, searched in freezing conditions for several hours. They resumed their search at around 9 o'clock this morning, but found nothing. It was called off early this afternoon. This area is popular with Microlight aircraft pilots. Police Scotland now believe reports of a possible accident were a well-intentioned false alarm. Katie Hunter, reporting Scotland, Cambusbarron.
For many children, today is the first day back at school after the holidays. But new research suggests many parents won't be letting their children walk or cycle to classes. A survey by Green campaigners and the PTA found 42% of parents worry it's not safe, despite the obvious health benefits. These are Summers reports.
Even on the brightest of winter days after a long holiday, it can be a big effort getting to and from school. At Pinkie Primary in Musselburgh, they do better than many others when it comes to walking and cycling.
We walk every day, and I would rather that anyway, than get exercise in the morning and wake him up before he goes to school.
We don't get tired legs.
And why do you like walking to school? Do you know why it's good for you to walk to school?
Because it's good exercise.
But many parents said they still prefer to drive their children to school.
The speed that the cars along this road as well is ridiculous. Double parking outside the school, things like that, it's all a safety issue, so for me it's a lot safer driving to school.
I think walking's definitely better for them to walk to school, but it is a worry, especially the speed of the cars on this road.
I wouldn't let them cross the busy roads and things themselves. But no, as I say, I always drive to school, and I don't have to cross any roads.
The joint survey by the campaign group Sustrans and the Scottish Parent Teacher Council asked over 1,000 parents why they made these choices for their children. Many parents said it was things like busy roads or a lack of crossings or even specialised cycle paths that puts them off allowing their children to come to school on their own. But for some, it came down to convenience. The third biggest barrier that parents cited was a lack of time. Some schools like this one in Edinburgh have introduced pedestrian zones. Cars are banned during pick-up and drop-off times. The government says this year it'll double the money available to encourage walking and cycling. But Sustrans say everybody has a role to play.
Not allowing our children to walk and cycle to school is having a big impact on their health. And you can accumulate a lot of the daily activity you need just by simply walking and cycling every day to and from school, which is really the norm in a lot of other small northern European countries.
The good news is almost half of Scottish children do walk to school, but with conflicting messages about safety in the surrounding area, it's not likely we'll be waving goodbye to the car anytime soon. Lisa Summers reporting Scotland, Musselburgh.
Now, it's known as the Highlands of the Lowlands, and apart from its beauty, Galloway Forest Park is also a working forest and vital to the economy of the area. It's also the star of a documentary series which begins tonight. Willie Johnson reports.
Galloway Forest, the UK's largest, covering a breathtaking 400 square miles, making it the major player in Scotland's billion-pound timber industry.
It's the third of a kind for BBC Scotland, after The Mountain, which focused on Cairngorm, and The River, about the people of the Tweed.
For me, I think it was quite a logical one to actually do, was the forest. It's very much, certainly in the southwest, it is the beating heart of Galloway. I think it's a great opportunity, and I said we welcomed it right from the outset.
We'll be following the hidden army working in this spectacular landscape and meeting the extraordinary people who live here.
Characters like recreation forester Archie McNeely and labourer Cool, a budding double act.
Archie's an expert on it, Kim. He's never worked one of these in his life, but he'll tell you how to do it. Am I right, Archie? Correct. But no, he doesn't trust us. No. Bear in mind that's how we call him Simba, because he's always lying, Kim. We don't trust him.
There's a free-flight aviary here that's like 100 foot square and 30 foot tall. It's huge.
There are previously untold stories, like a secret breeding centre for the world's largest flying parrot.
Skyline is probably one of the most dangerous jobs you could do in this country. There's a lot of things to go wrong.
And at the heart of the programme, those involved in the core business of timber production.
If we don't produce anything, we don't make any money.
Dropping big trees in a woodland. It sort of brings the primeval man out, doesn't it?
Willie Johnston reporting Scotland, Galloway.
And you can see the first episode of The Forest on BBC One Scotland at 7:30. Now, let's get the weather. A beautiful day for many, but a cold one.
Wasn't it just, Jackie? Thank you very much indeed. Hello there. Beautiful, crisp conditions across most of the country today, and plenty of sunshine and blue sky. And whilst many ended the day with clear skies, change afoot tonight with cloud building. But the temperature is already falling away, so it will be a cold night despite that cloud moving in from the south to reach most parts. Quite breezy around the coast from the south or southeast, and temperatures at their lowest down to freezing or just below. But that does mean tomorrow, with that cloud overhead, it's going to be a fairly grey day and a fairly cold day with that cold air trapped beneath the cloud. Now, the odd spot of light rain or drizzle over the hills, perhaps the odd flurry at times, but for most of us it will be a dry day, but a grey day and a cold day. By mid-afternoon, 3-4 Celsius probably at best, a little bit milder around the coast, but add on the strength of the wind here, and it will feel quite bitter at times. There'll be something a touch brighter at times through parts of Ayrshire, maybe the central belt, but the best of any sunshine really confined towards this slice of the country in the northwest through the Highlands and Islands. Elsewhere, pretty disappointing, certainly compared with what we had earlier today. And windy, as I say, for the Northern Isles, we could be close to gale force through Shetland. Rest of the afternoon into the evening and overnight, little change until much later on with this weather front arriving from the southwest, bringing rain through the early hours. And it will be rain for most, snow on the hills, but it sort of fizzles away. Fairly lacklustre attempt, really. And whilst Wednesday starts cloudy for some in the northeast and the far north, with the odd spot of rain elsewhere, it improves to something much brighter than what we'll have tomorrow. But again, cool at times, 3 to 5 Celsius. And then, looking ahead towards Thursday, we start to see this area of high pressure just nosing its way in, bringing a settled day. But you can see behind me here, this area of low pressure. Unfortunately, that's coming our way at the weekend. But before we get there, Thursday looks all right. Bright, dry and sunny. The only one fly in the ointment could well be some freezing fog patches, which could be stubborn to clear. That's the forecast for now.
Thank you, Christopher. And now a reminder of tonight's main news. A couple who met on an internet dating website have been convicted of planning a Christmas terror attack inspired by the Islamic State group. And that's Reporting Scotland. I'm back with the headlines at 8 and for the late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. Until then, from all the team, good evening.